Not everyone needs to think like an accountant. The world needs, a business needs the sales people to operate the way they do. A business needs the compliance people to think the way they do. A business needs the accountants to do things the way they do. And yeah, that's definitely a skill I had to develop pretty quickly moving here, because I remember going home some nights from work, my first few weeks here, just been like, what on earth is...
Don't get it.
What is this office?
Yeah.
It's a little bit Wolf of Wall Street, like, but that's how they do their job, and that's the way that they are. So.
Thank you for listening to the podcast thus far. The one favor I would ask, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, is to press the follow and subscribe button on whatever media platform you listen to us, as it helps us grow our network and grow the podcast. So thank you and enjoy the podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Alchemy Search podcast. I'm Lewis, Principal Consultant at Alchemy Search. Today we are joined by Josh Burton. Josh is a Chartered Accountant and Level 4 Qualified Financial Advisor, currently CFO at Skybound Wealth Management, a global financial advisory business with headquarters in Dubai. Josh has lived in the UAE for almost 10 years, originally from Wakefield in the UK. He started his career as an accountant and an auditor back home while studying towards his ACA, then transitioning out of practice, and has progressed with the same company over the last 11 years, including taking an 18-month sabbatical break in 2022 and undertaking virtual finance director work for several businesses over the last few years. Josh is a keen golfer and triathlete in his spare time. Josh, welcome to the Alchemy podcast. How's things?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Lewis. Thanks for having me.
No worries. You busy at the moment with triathlon, golfing? What's been taking your time?
Yeah, really busy actually at the minute. Work's crazy. End of the financial year, December, and then I love my golf over here. I'm a member at a club, and yeah, I've got a triathlon, got a half Ironman in a few weeks. So everything going on, but loving it. I love being busy, and I think Dubai is the perfect place to do that. So
how's the training going?
It's a tough balance, as you know. You're into similar things, so balancing work, the golf, a bit of social life, and then hours and hours on the bike and running is tough. But the weather recently has been fantastic for it. So, all good. I'm looking forward to it.
I think recently I realised the weather's changed probably the last week or so, where them long runs, which you need to get in, it's getting hot, isn't it?
Get a bit sweaty. Yeah. You can see the wind has changed, the air has changed. It's no longer a cool wind. It's that the summer's definitely coming. So, yes, I always say to people, make the most of it. Don't be ungrateful for that winter time in Dubai. Yeah.
Well, a couple of weeks, and then you'll be on the start line, and then we'll be stuck inside.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to a few drinks, I think, after I've finished, because I'm trying to be strict. We were talking about meal plans. I'm on this meal plan. I'm trying to behave myself on a weekend. It's tough. So I'm looking forward to finishing. Yeah, it'll be good.
Fair enough. Good. Well, appreciate you obviously coming on to the podcast. I think what would be good to start is give us a bit of an overview of your career in the UAE, because I think it's been 10 years.
Almost 10 years here.
Yeah, so just give us a quick snapshot of what you've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, I moved here young. I moved here when I was 22. I had an opportunity to move over, and I kind of grasped it, not really understanding at that point what even Dubai was. I mean, Dubai's all the rage these days, but kind of 9-10 years ago, it wasn't like that. So yeah, I moved over here very young. Started off at a pretty low-level position. I mean, I was a kind of finance manager position, and then I've just kind of grafted over the last few years, taken on various different roles, responsibilities, and yeah, moved my way up through one company. A little bit of a break in the middle, which we'll talk about later, but yeah, currently in a CFO position for Skybound Wealth, kind of multinational, multi-regulated financial advisory firm, and I love it. The office for me is a perfect blend of that accounting, finance side with the salespeople in the office and the execs. So yeah, in the CFO position at the minute, really enjoying it. I think that I'm able to use everything I've learned over the last kind of 7-8 years in Dubai, progressing in my current role, and loving it at the minute. Yeah,
because you've had a rapid trajectory from, like you say, accountant. You started in audit, was it in the UK?
Yeah, I was in a quite small accountancy practice in Yorkshire. I was in a bit of everything. I was doing farmers' tax returns to audit of construction companies, and again, I look back and I'm actually really glad I picked a firm of that size rather than a big four or a bigger firm, because I got exposure to so many things. So yeah, I would say I think I'm everyone says the same. I'm pretty young for the position I'm in, but I think I've been able to get to this point because I've just kind of grafted, and I've never really said I've really said no to anything. I've been able to use that exposure I got at a young age in the UK within the accountancy firm to use that over here as I've grown. So I got to my position pretty quickly. Again, I mentioned the break that I had a few years ago. I think that, the hard work I put in meant that I needed to have that break at some point, but I'm really grateful to be able to have that sabbatical travel break. I suppose a little bit later in life, it meant I was able to do that with a bit of a budget, and
rather than straight out of education, I guess. Yeah.
Doing it on a bit of a shoestring, I was able to really take that time to travel the world and reset a little bit. And it's the best thing I ever did, because since coming back, I find myself in a completely different mindset. Yeah, loving my role at the moment. I'm looking to do, I'm starting to do a little bit of, client advisory work alongside my CFO role at the minute. I've recently passed my CISI level 4 qualification. I've always looked at the financial advisors within Skybound Wealth and, wanting to give what they do a go. So I'm starting to do that now, and I'm really starting to enjoy that blend of, corporate, exec board level work, accounting work, and then some of that personal financial advice work as well with people across the Middle East.
So what do you think? I remember when we spoke offline and preparing for this, what's been the key to your rapid growth as a CFO? Is it size of business? You mentioned about never saying no. Tell us what you think has led to such a quick trajectory.
I think I've been lucky with the types of business that I've worked in so far in my career. I think that, like I said, my first role was in a pretty small practice where I was able to do things and see things that most people at a junior level probably wouldn't see. I was probably given too much responsibility at points.
Thrown right into the deep end.
Yeah, thrown in the deep end. Put in front of and leading audits of academies and companies and charities that I was nowhere near ready for. But at the time, the company I was working for, we didn't have the resource to do it. So I was thrown in the deep end. And I suppose one of the strengths that I've got, which I think has helped, is I don't necessarily panic. I've seen people over the years in accountancy firms panic when they're given work and they don't know what to do. I don't really panic. I think I'm able to just take on new challenges and grow into them. So I think I've been lucky with the first firm that I joined. And then secondly, the firm that I moved to was a firm called Guardian Wealth Management. Again, just a great company to be a part of, because I was actually using this term earlier. I was speaking about this earlier with somebody about, the difference between a small company and a small company, because there's two versions of that. A small company, when I think of it, is a company with 10 staff, not much turnover. But in the true definition of a small company, that spans all the way to maybe a firm with 250 staff turning over 20 million quid. So I think that size of business that's kind of small in its nature and how it operates is quite dynamic, but still has that size and that growth potential is where I've fallen with the Guardian Wealth job. So I started there. I think that I would say not panicking when new tasks come across my desk has been key. I think never saying no is absolutely crucial to where I've got to. I mean, I've done things over the years that are probably nothing to do with finance and accounting. I mean, I've looked at a wide array of HR-related tasks, operational-related tasks, even some sales-related tasks, and just been willing to give things a go and roll my sleeves up. I think another key thing, especially in the early days of me moving to Dubai, was it's, I suppose, been a bit fearless when speaking with maybe people who are above me, directors of a business, owner of a business, in getting my point across. Even if I know it's not going to be agreed with. I think having that courage to be able to say something that could ultimately risk your position has really helped, because at the end of the day, that's respected by an owner of a business. So that's enabled me to grow. Yeah, I mean those are the key things. I think another one for me is again just having confidence in my own ability. I find myself sometimes in situations where I'm speaking to people. I have been in a situation where I'm speaking to people about topics and it's just like I've got no idea actually what this means. But I mean, these days, you're able to go away and use the likes of ChatGPT and research and things like that. And one thing I've found, as I've grown into my career, is most people are in the same position. When you speak to somebody, they could come across like they know what they're talking about and they've got full understanding. But at the end of the day, most people, when they're dealing with things, are dealing with things for the first time many times, especially I'd say in this region. So yeah, those are the key things, and that's kind of what's led me kind of through this transition and where I am at the minute. And it hasn't been easy, I would say that. I mean,
take a lot of work, I guess, a lot of hard work.
I mean, one thing I've missed there is hard work. You know, I've rolled my sleeves up. I've sacrificed personal relationships. I've sacrificed personal time. I'm a very driven and ambitious person, and sometimes I can be a bit blinkered. And I think that's, again, one of the things that's led to this quick progression. But yeah, the hard work, which comes with its downsides. You know, like I said, I've sacrificed things. I've burnt out myself at times. But that's an absolutely crucial thing. I think that comes hand in hand with the not saying no piece, because I think you can say no to things on two accounts. You can say, no, I don't have time. Or you can say, no, I actually don't. That's not my remit. I'm not doing that. And I would always just say yes to anything. And that comes with the consequences of maybe having to work crazy hours, you know, work late into the night, work a weekend, or having to go away and spend that time to research and look into things. But yeah, those are the key traits, I think.
Yeah, to me it stands out like curiosity. I think you've demonstrated a lot of curiosity, right? We'll come on to the financial planning piece shortly, because that's demonstrated curiosity in what your actual business, the sales guys, the operation guys are doing. And like you say, we all probably put people on a pedestal or expect people to have the answers. Like, oh, you're a CFO, you must know everything. When really, it's like you say, going away and actually learning for the first time, rather than going, oh, I must know X because I'm in X position. I'm guessing that's kind of really come through with what you said.
Definitely. I mean, I still get that now. You know, I mean, if I think about my current position, we're a multinational company. We've got entities in, you know, the US, the UK, Cyprus. We're just opening in Mauritius and Malaysia. You know, I've got a call in the diary in the morning to talk about setting up a Malaysian regulatory license,
which obviously you've done before.
I'm going into that call. You know, I have no idea about the details, but I know I can go into there and just apply my experience and my knowledge from doing things previously, and just my general sense of logic to be able to formulate whatever needs to be done and work with the people to get that going. And again, I think that's something I get asked by people, members of the team, friends back home. Is like, how do you know how that works and that works? And often the answer is like, I don't know the details, but I know high level how to piece things together and rely then upon the expertise of other people. But yeah, that's actually one thing I'd like to touch on, is like in my current role at the minute, one of the things I absolutely love is the range and the variety. Like if I look at my diary from today before we've come here, like the variety of different meetings and calls and things that I've looked at is mental. But that's what makes it such good fun. If I was just sat there doing spreadsheets all day for the one entity in the one region.
Do you think that's the modern CFO now, or do you think that's just the position, company you're in, that you have so much flexibility and difference in your schedule?
I think the world's definitely changed for that CFO piece. I mean, Alchemy did the CFO morning the other month, and that was fantastic to see everyone's different kind of views on things. But yeah, I think if I try and relate back where the accounting world is right now to where it was when I first kind of entered that sector, you know, that was your typical accountant, you know, middle-aged bloke in an office, bit of a nerd, good with numbers. Your typical CFO or your good CFO is not like that now. It's somebody that's able to still, I suppose, do that stuff, but also connect with the rest of a business, the stakeholders, and have a little bit of personality. And I think LinkedIn shows that these days. You know, LinkedIn exposes and lets you see that kind of wide range of people. But yeah, just come back to your point on I think curiosity is a great word that you used. I'm a very curious person. In fact, I always get told by our current CEO that I cannot stay in my lane. Use this term at work, like staying in your lane. I don't stay in my lane. You know, if I see something over there that interests me, or I think that I either can add value to it or I can gain value from it, I'll go and get involved. And I think that is a curiosity thing, and I think that's also key to people being able to progress pretty quickly in these kind of small and nimble organisations.
I suppose if you're a senior member of the team or a senior leader, you've got to have a handle on more than just, like you say, your lane. Whether it's CFO, whether it's CEO, you need to have a full overarching view of the organisation, I guess. You mentioned, so it was Guardian Wealth, which was then a family-owned business, which when evolved, got private equity. Tell me that journey and how that's kind of impacted you.
Because that's also been a great part of my story, because yeah, the original firm that I joined was was kind of entrepreneur driven. A few guys from the UK that had built this pretty decent business where they'd expanded from the UK and gone, Dubai, Qatar, Hong Kong, across Europe. But it was often quite difficult for me coming in as a professional accountant, to try and get the owners at that point to understand accounts, financials, forecasting, regulatory requirements, because they were more sales-driven, sales-oriented people.
Just grow, and the finance function will drag along
everything else afterwards, which is often that entrepreneurial mindset that you need. So I went through a period of I suppose, struggling to get people to listen to me and that finance operational function. And then about six years ago, the firm was acquired by a large private equity company called Skybound Capital out of South Africa. And that's where my world changed, because I went from having no other senior support on that front to my bosses super conscious about financials and really caring about wanting to see financials and forecasts and ask those questions that previously I was begging to give an answer to. So I've seen both sides of it, and I think that first side where I had to be quite courageous in how I dealt with the owners of the business to help them really gave me that confidence to grow. And then when I'm now working for a more corporately run business, with proper shareholders, financial reporting requirements from that side, I'm now able to actually learn a lot from that coming down. Whereas before, I suppose I had to be quite self-taught. Now I'm able to lean on the private equity firm. They've got a team full of analysts in Cape Town. I speak to them on a regular basis. They're able to teach me so much from their side of things and what they want to see. But I actually like that I've been able to see both sides, because I think it's enabled me to develop, I suppose, my career personality in the way that it is today.
Yeah. So that transition 6 years ago, where you've gone from like trying to get people to understand finance and what finance means to now where I imagine being private equity owned, it's fully driven.
Pressurized, yeah.
Pressurized environment. Like, how have you evolved as a CFO then? Because I remember we had a conversation, you mentioned a board meeting and kind of the pressures of that. Like, what's the reality of these guys now owning the business and how that impacts your day to day?
Recent board meetings are a good example, because I remember when the business was smaller and privately owned, there would be management meetings, but typically people would turn up with no prep, sit around a table and just have a bit of a chin wag and decide which way the business should go. And I would often turn up prepped, and nobody would really want to sit and look at the figures.
Send an email.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that can be a bit disheartening, because you put the work in. So
been up all night preparing the pack, and they just want to email.
Yeah, exactly. So what's nice now, and the recent board meeting that I attended and presented at is refreshing, is because you put the work in, you present the figures, the reports, the strategy plan, and then when you sit in the meeting, that is what is the base of the meeting, and you go through that, page by page, and that's nice, but it does come with the pressure of, what you're preparing is going to be relied upon. It's got to be delivered on time. So I suppose it's a much more pressurized environment, but it's actually something that I thrive. I think I thrive under pressure, as most people do. So yeah, I love it. It's a lot more corporate these days. There's corporate governance to think about. There's things like delegation of authority flowing down from that top level. But again, that's stuff that I suppose I'm learning as I'm now working in this new private equity environment. And again, I really enjoy that. I'm a typical accountant where I like structure. I like to know whether something in my head, something's black or it's white. Whereas I think previously the managers of the previous business were much more grey area.
So that's entrepreneurs, right? Sometimes one minute you're going this way and then you're going a complete opposite direction. And I guess, like you say, if you're used to structure and you thrive on structure, it can be challenging to navigate, and now you're crying out for the structure which you've got, but it has its own
structure. Then brings pressure because you're accountable. I think that's probably one of the other things I really struggled with when I first moved to Dubai. I'd gone from working in an accountancy practice where 95% of the organization are accountants, so they think the same way as I thought, which was structure, it's black or it's white. It's run by a spreadsheet, it's run by numbers. I then came to Dubai, and the finance function is a part of a much larger sales office. So I was then 5% of the business was finance, and the rest was predominantly sales driven. And that was really my first interaction in my career with a true sales floor or a group of sales individuals. And it took me a good, I'd say 12 to 18 months to adapt with how to interact with a salesperson compared to a fellow accountant. You know, you speak to a fellow accountant, you typically get to the point pretty quickly. You know, you typically make an agreement on something, discuss a topic.
Sales guys just telling you what you want to hear, are they?
It's clear. Whereas, a sales individual...
always optimistic, always giving you good
absolutely.
News.
Yes, yeah. You know, often want to have a bit of a personal chat before you get into the chat. And I found that quite difficult. I found that quite difficult to deal with when I first moved here. But I'd say I've managed to actually absorb a lot of the skills, because it's a skill, right? The sales is a skill. I've managed to absorb a lot of that and build that into how I operate now. So, but I actually love that our office is a complete mix at the minute of, you've got a finance function, you've got an operations function, HR, compliance, and then the large sales floor in the middle is great fun. And I think that's where I've developed, I suppose, emotionally over the last few years. Is I can now see where, you know, not everybody needs to be the same. Not everyone needs to think like an accountant. You know, the world needs, a business needs the sales people to operate the way they do. A business needs the compliance people to think the way they do. A business needs the accountants to do things the way they do. And yeah, that's definitely a skill I had to develop pretty quickly moving here, because I remember going home some nights from work, my first few weeks here, just been like, what on earth is...
Don't get it.
What is this office?
Yeah.
It's a little bit Wolf of Wall Street, like, but that's how they do their job, and that's the way that they are. So yeah, and I've met some amazing people along the way who, you know, if I was stuck in the UK in my accounting job, I would never ever have come across people from that walk of life, you know, that kind of career, that kind of personality. So yeah, I'm incredibly grateful. Looking back, I'm very glad I decided to make that move so young at 22, because it's brought me out of my shell. When I first moved here, I was a typical accountant from Yorkshire, and I think I've adapted and changed.
Be interesting if you look back in hindsight, like you're saying, you've done the last 10 years in the UK, where you would be, both from a career perspective but also as a person, because like you say, you meet so many different people, and I guess you learn how different people tick and how to manage different people. Like that's a point for you, really. Firstly, when you moved here, or when a lot of people are leaving home country, I see a lot of them do struggle with that transition from, it's different from your home country. Let's use the UK, for example, where we're both from. Tell me a bit about like how people can better transition from working in the UK, they move to Dubai, they're in their first job, because it is a bit of a culture shock. Like how did you manage that, and what have you seen in the last 10 years?
I think it's different depending on where you're at in life. I see this with people that I see move to Dubai. I think that people actually who are probably of the age I was when I moved here, so 22, 20, are actually able to handle it much easier and embed themselves much quicker than, say, somebody that's moving here a little bit older with a family, having to embed them, because I think you're just able to I suppose adapt a little bit quicker. Over the last 10 years for me, I can see that the UK and Dubai has definitely gone like this. You know, I think that the UK's become much more this kind of woke culture. You know, the UK still very much favors the employee, and I think that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Dubai's not yet hit that. I don't think. I think it will at some point. But Dubai's still a very much employer-driven market. And I think that's a bit of a culture shock for people moving over. Obviously, in the UK, you typically work with fellow Brits. You move over here, again, I look at our office and the people that I work with, there's an absolute array of different cultures, which is absolutely fantastic. But that can be a little bit of a challenge, because there's often, you know, communication issues, I think just general cultural ways of working and being. And I see that as a bit of a challenge for people when they move over. But I think the key thing is just coming over with a little bit of an open mind, not coming over thinking, well, this doesn't operate the same way as it did in the UK, therefore it's wrong. But actually being open-minded, that actually is the way that things work in Dubai, actually a little bit better, you know, for the local market than the way it works in the UK. But I actually see at the minute that there are so many people. I mean, you're in recruitment, you should see it, I would hope, and it's good for you guys, but you know, the number of people that are looking to leave the UK and make a move to the Middle East, to Dubai, is massive at the minute.
I think it's alarming, to be honest, for the future, maybe future years, future generations. We're similar age, right? So our age group, a lot of them have left, whether it's Dubai, wherever, right? Australia is quite a popular destination, whether it's Europe. People are leaving in their troves, and what impact is that going to have on the workforce in the future will be, I suppose, interesting to see. But Dubai is obviously going up, but that then brings in more people, and we'll have to see how that then affects everything from job availability to packages to everything associated, really. So you mentioned the financial planner piece. So tell us about that. How do you juggle the CFO, private equity owned, targets, stress, pressure, and then you've said, you know what, that's not enough. I'm going to try and get involved with some financial planning, sales, whatever that consists. Like, tell us about.
Like I said, I've worked alongside financial advisors that have been doing this for years and years, and I've always looked at what they're doing. It just really interests me because it's a real tangible service that they're giving to an end client, which I typically wouldn't do in my accounting role. Typically just doing it for the business, for the wider business. So I was really interested in getting into some kind of role and environment where I'm able to help individuals directly. And I actually had a bit of experience in that a few years ago when I had a bit of a sabbatical break, and at the end of that I did some consulting work for some smaller businesses in like fractional virtual FD, finance director roles. And that was a little bit more like that, where I felt I could feel the benefit I was giving people by giving them my financial expertise, advice. So I've always looked at it. I've always wanted to give it a go. I think that there's two sides to it. There's the fact that you're able to, speak with clients wherever they are in the world and help them with a bit of financial planning and a financial journey with some initial advice. But then you get to retain that individual, hopefully throughout their life, as they go through that journey, and help them along the way, and build something which in our industry is known as AUM, so assets under management, where you build a bank of clients that have investments that you basically sit on and manage and help them go through that. So it's not going to be easy for me to manage, I suppose, both roles. But in my head, I said to myself, if I've got to give it a go at some point, and I've been thinking about it for years. I was using a life coach for a while, and she's the one that really pushed me to go for it. So one of the things I'm working on at the minute is building out the finance function at work, hiring a few more kind of senior level people within that function so that I can really operate truly as a more high level CFO to buy myself maybe a day a week, a couple of days a week to see clients individually and see how I get on. And I said to people, I think that I will win either way with this, because either I'll give it a go and I won't be very good at it because I'm lacking some of the sales side. But if I'm not very good at it, I will then understand the mind of the sales guys at work a lot more, and I'll be able to adapt how I suppose I deal with that side, or I'll be successful at it, and I can then grow that side of my career.
Because so was it, you class it's like financial planning, wealth management? Like, what's the overarching term of?
Financial planning is a good term, and that's typically, from a UK perspective, which is like best practice. That's how it's done. I think the Middle East is a little bit tainted because the financial advisor in the Middle East over the last few years, 10, 20 years, has been seen as somebody that's going to come and flog you
Well, that was my point. Like, what's the landscape? Because I've only been here 2.5 years, and I hear stories of the past, but I see lots of new entrants. I see well-known brands. I see you guys and what some of your competitors are doing, and it seems to be trying to maybe follow the more UK model. Like, what's the landscape of?
The landscape's changed in the Middle East, definitely, since I got here. When I first got here, a financial advisor was just seen as somebody that's going to try and sell you an insurance policy or an investment product. Everything's now transitioning to becoming more holistic financial planning. So instead of sitting with you and having my briefcase with an investment product in it, and I know I'm going to try and sell it to you, I would sit with you as an end client, and first of all, just work out what is it that you actually need here to, I suppose, number one, get your immediate finances structured, and number two, look into the future and look at your goals and I suppose aspirations, and how do we piece in that financial part of that journey. So basic financial planning, so that could be cash flow modeling. It could be debt restructuring. It could be looking at your current investments and making sure that they're appropriate. It could be tax planning. It could be looking at whether, if you're here with a family, are you protected? Have you got the right insurances in place? So there's an absolutely massive scope, which is the thing that I think excites me about it, because from my experience working in financial services, I understand all of the different services that are available. I think the thing that makes me a little bit nervous is that sales side, because I've never really had first-hand experience at it. But I've started recently. I've already seen a few clients. I'm enjoying it. I think that the most difficult thing for me will be the juggling of time and making sure that making sure that I'm able to balance my CFO time so I can give it a proper go, but then making sure that I don't get too busy on the financial advisory side so I can still do a top quality job in the CFO role.
Yeah, interesting. Because, the financial planning market, even in the time I've been here, has definitely changed. And there's a lot more, I think, understanding now, especially our generation, if we compare to our parents, around like investments. And people assume investments is sat at your screen trading, right? It's not. It's obviously much more than that, and actually much more, I think, simple. It's much more simpler than people perhaps give it credit for, but you only need a bit of advice, whether it's you guys, even if it's not with a planner, it's just online, right? There's so much accessible information out there, and it blows my mind. I mean, it's a topic I'm quite interested in myself, like how many people just don't have their financial affairs in place, especially here. Because we're not paying tax, right? So hopefully you're in a good position, but the stories you hear of people who literally month to month, they've got nothing.
Well, and that's why firms like Skybound Wealth are so important in areas like this. The UK, you have things like pensions are a requirement. Here you get end of service benefit, but at the end of the day, that's not going to look after you when you retire. It's just a little bit of a bonus when you decide to leave the company. So, Dubai's a bit of a dangerous place for people that are moving here and get caught in that trap. When I first moved here, I got caught in the trap. Well, I moved here, and I wasn't getting paid huge amounts. It was tax free, so I got a little bit of a bump. But the cost of living here is a lot. But I was just out one day in my first few weeks being here. I got my visa, I got my Emirates ID, and for some reason I went to the Mercedes showroom. I don't know why. I just did, and I walked in, and one of the sales guys, I remember him clearly, a guy called Louis, he got me. And I walked out having signed for a brand new C-Class Mercedes that I couldn't afford, but it had been financed and packaged in a way that I thought that I could afford it. And I remember the first few weeks was a dream, because I'm driving around Dubai in this Mercedes, sending pictures back home to my friends. I'm 22 years old. And then a few weeks later, when the first payment comes out, I was like, I can't afford this. So then I had to really struggle for a year, 2 years. And looking back, like, it was what a stupid decision. But so many people get caught in that trap. But actually, looking back, I'm quite glad I did it, because it taught me quite early on that it is so easy to go down that route. But it's such a common thing over here, which is why so many people need a little bit of guidance and somebody to kind of lean on from a finance perspective, because it's just, it's Dubai. There are flashing lights everywhere and temptations everywhere, and it's so easy to spend everything that you earn. And I think there's actually an interesting statistic, which is most people leave Dubai with less than they came with, which is crazy if you think about it, given that it's completely tax-free. Yeah, which is, like I said, which is why financial planning, whether you decide to do it yourself, because it's so much easier these days than it was a few years ago, because you've got ChatGPT, you've got videos on Instagram, you've got LinkedIn. It's all there for you to do.
Basics, right, of how to invest is so easy now. The tax stuff and whatever.
But even that's there. You can go on ChatGPT and ask it some questions, and it will tell you what the most tax efficient way of managing your money is, and if you're planning to move back to the UK, etc. I think the one value that a financial advisor gives you, which you can't get from online, is discipline. A bit like a personal trainer.
They hold you accountable.
Everyone starts going to the gym in January, but we know what happens. By the end of January, the majority of people have stopped going. those people that go to the gym and sign up for a personal trainer for the year will still be going to the gym in February, March, April. A financial advisor, financial planner is exactly the same thing. They will keep you in line. They'll keep you in check, because especially in a place like Dubai, your brain is you're brainwashable. Like it's easy to get derailed and think, well, maybe I can move to Dubai Hills and afford that villa, and maybe I can get that car. Maybe I could go to brunch this weekend. To have somebody there to just remind you, and it's not an every day, every week thing. Just remind you what things do look like is really important. Again, especially given there is no pension system here. It's a massive thing. Yes, you've got your state pension in the UK. Again, many people forget that unless you keep paying your national insurance in the UK, that won't be available to you. But typically in the UK, your employer will look after your pension. You will put in, you have to. Your employer will put in, and that will just grow for you over time. As soon as you leave the UK, that stops unless you get a personal arrangement in place.
Yeah, so you said you weren't very good at sales. Well, I think you've done a good job there, firstly. And if anyone wants any financial advice, then maybe reach out to you. You're taking on clients by the sounds of it. So what's next for you then? Obviously, you've been here 10 years, you're still young, CFO, financial planner. Like, where do you see your career going?
I'll be honest, I don't ever see myself back in the UK. I love Dubai. I love my life in Dubai at the minute. I just think it's a great place to be as a kind of young, hungry, driven individual. Lifestyle is fantastic. Although Saudi Arabia, intrigues me. I think we said this last time we got together. Like, it intrigues me. I speak to so many people here in Dubai who got into Dubai 20, 30 years ago, and they're all at another level to the people that got here 5-10 years ago, because they got in when it was early, and earnings were maybe a little bit higher, cost of living was a little bit less.
Like an early adopter, right?
Early adopter, and I see that there's an opportunity right now with Saudi. I think Saudi will develop much quicker than the UAE has, but that excites me. Do I want to go live there right now? No, but I'm open to exploring what business opportunities are over there for Skybound Wealth, for myself personally. And then from there, I'm not sure. I mean, for me, as long as I live somewhere where, I can run, swim and cycle, the sun's out most of the time, and there's amazing golf courses, and there's no tax, I don't see myself ever needing to leave. So that's the plan. I mean, I love my CFO role. I love that corporate world. I think the key for me over the next few years is to keep doing that and growing with the company that I'm working with. Keep learning. That's a key thing for me. And while I'm doing that, try and develop this other angle, this personal financial advice angle, grow a bank of clients, and just see where it takes me.
It's a busy few years ahead then.
It is, yeah.
Fair enough. So a few quick fire questions then, just to wrap up the podcast. So if you weren't a CFO, what do you think you would be career wise?
I've absolutely no idea. I became an accountant just because I wanted to do something where I didn't have to go to university, that I could progress in. I think a teacher. Really? Yeah, I always had that when I was younger.
PE, history.
I have no idea.
Maths.
I just always toyed with the idea of being a teacher, which is interesting because I typically kids annoy me. Yeah, I think a teacher.
All right, fair enough. Favorite restaurant in Dubai?
Opa. If you've been to the Greek restaurant in the Fairmont, yeah, I mean it's mental. The food's incredible, but you go a bit wild. You're throwing your towel around and you're smashing plates, and there's loud music and people dancing. Yeah, it's fantastic.
And favourite holiday destination? It's definitely going to be golf related. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean I love the Algarve and that kind of southern coast of Spain for golf, but that's not really it's not a good place to go when you're in Dubai. I love Thailand. I spent quite a lot of time in Thailand. I think Thailand's a great place for people to go when you're living in Dubai. It's a hop on a plane. Yeah, it's nothing. But yeah, I'm into my Muay Thai and stuff like that. So Thailand's a great destination.
Final piece of advice you would give to any of the listeners, whether it's around financial planning, whether it's around your CFO career, like what one piece of advice?
I think I'll go back to the point that we touched on at the start, which is, if you're coming to Dubai, I suppose anywhere in the world, and you're looking to grow really quickly in like that kind of small to medium sized company, is just don't say no to anything, within reason. But, if something comes across your desk or there's an opportunity there, just grab it with both hands and give it a go, even if it scares you a little bit and you think you've got no idea how you can actually do it. Because I think that's the key for me to growing your, I suppose, knowledge base within a business and with your career really quickly. And for me, that was the key to really quick progression. And my success was just rolling my sleeves up and getting involved with whatever is needed, even if it's outside of accounting, finance, or what it is that I'm, if you read my job description, I'd say that 60-70% of what I do is not on my job description. I think that's a key factor for somebody young, driven, hungry that wants to progress really quickly.
Just curiosity. Don't say no, obviously, within reason. Learn, and you hopefully will then see the fruits of your labour, I guess. So appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully a useful podcast. I think touching on that financial planning piece coupled with obviously your CFO trajectory will be quite useful, hopefully, for the listeners. So appreciate you taking the time, and look forward to seeing everyone on the next episode.